Everyone talked about it. The pretty and popular girl murdered by her boyfriend, who then goes and unlives himself. Everyone also thought they knew what happened. But 5 years later, a senior decides to re-examine the closed case for her final school project. She thought there was more to the story. And soon she discovers a trail of dark secrets that might actually prove the boyfriend's innocence. This is a story of an investigation turned obsession, full of twists and turns, and a main character who might just be in over her head. Hey there, it's Cherie, and if you're new here, welcome to my channel, and if you're not new, welcome back to my channel. Here we discuss books, and more books. And today I'm introducing a new series where I read a book, probably a popular one, just to see what all the fuss is about, and then we come together to chat about it. Like a book club. So if that is something you are interested in, go ahead and like this video, as well as subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future videos. For today's video, we are here to discuss a mystery, a thriller, a book titled A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This book has been popular online for a few years now, and I wanted to talk about it. And just so you know, there will be spoilers. So Pip, our main character, is trying to figure out what really happened to Andy Bell. She doesn't believe that Sal, Andy's boyfriend, did it, and she's trying to figure out who did. Why is this so important to her? She knew Sal. She would spend time over at the wards with Kara, her best friend, and with Sal being best friends with Naomi, she would see him often. Sal also helped Pip when she was being bullied. In her own words, he had been a hero to her and she just couldn't believe that he did it. We should probably get to a list of characters since I've already named some. Better to get to that before I start word vomiting everything and just talk about everything in this book all at once. But I want to be a bit organized while we go through it. We have our main character, Pippa Fitzamobi. She goes by Pip. Her parents, Victor and Leanne. Her brother, Josh. Her dog, Barney. Her best friend, Cara Ward. Cara's sister, Naomi, who was also best friends with Sal. Cara's father, Elliot, or Mr. Ward. Pip's other best friend, Lauren. Pip's other friends, Aunt, Zach, and Connor. The victim, Andy Bell. Andy's parents, Jason and Don. Andy's sister, Becca. Andy's best friends, Chloe Birch and Emma Hutton. The accused, Sal Singh. Sal's brother, Ravi. Sal's friend, Max Hastings. Sal's other friends, Jake Lawrence and Millie Simpson. Sal's parents, Mohan and Nisha. One of Pip's teachers, Mrs. Morgan. Reporter, Stanley Forbes. Nat De Silva. Nat's brother/police officer, Daniel De Silva. And local drug dealer, Howie Bowers. I hope I'm not missing anyone. That did seem like enough people, enough characters. But I guess I'll show up at some point throughout the rest of the video if I do think of anyone else. So throughout this story, we see that Pip is becoming obsessed with finding out what actually happened. She doesn't have time to spend with her friends. Her parents are fighting over how much time she spends on this project. And she starts to do things that she normally wouldn't do, like breaking and entering. And we'll get to that. So Pip's senior capstone project was how she was able to do her investigation in this case. She didn't start off by saying she's going to prove Sal's innocence. The topic was to be a report on how print, televised, and social media have become key players in police investigations, using Andy Bell as a case study and the implications of how the press presented Sal Singh and his alleged guilt. Her project was accepted on the conditions that 1. No ethical lines will be crossed. 2. She needed to find a more focused angle. And 3. No contact will be made with the families involved. With that last one, I wonder how she was not disqualified so early. The first chapter has Pip go to speak with Ravi, Sal's brother, and she interviews him soon after and enters a transcript in her capstone project log. The teacher must have been rather lenient with her actually speaking to the families. Mrs. Morgan, Pip's teacher, did say, "I'm concerned about the direction of your project," but that was about it. Let's break down what is believed to have happened to Andy Bell. Andy Bell was last seen Friday evening, April 18th, 2014. She was last seen alive by her younger sister Becca at 10:30 p.m. She left home with her cell phone, but did not take any clothes with her. She was seen by a security camera outside the bank on Fairview's Main Street, driving away from her home at about 10:40 p.m. She was supposed to pick up her parents from a dinner party at 12:45 a.m. After her parents didn't see Andy, they contacted her friends looking for her. Andy's father, Jason Bell, called the police at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning. Police spoke with Sal Singh sometime on Saturday, April 19th. Sal was with his friends Max Hastings, Naomi Ward, Jake Lawrence, and Millie Simpson. They were at Max Hastings' house, and Sal told the police he left there around 12:15 a.m. Sal was home at 12:50 a.m. The distance between Sal and Max's home is about 30 minutes walking. The police confirmed Sal's alibi with his friends. Missing posters went up on Sunday, April 20th, along with house-to-house inquiries. On Monday, April 21st, 100 volunteers helped the police carry searches in the local woodlawn. Later that day, forensic teams were spotted going into the Bell residence. Mid-morning on Tuesday, April 21st, Max, Millie, Naomi, and Jake all confessed to the police for providing false information. They then said that Sal had asked them to lie and that he actually had left Max's home around 10:30 p.m. on that Friday. Sal was now missing. Tuesday evening, Sal was found in the woods while police were searching for Andy Bell. He had sent his father what they believed to have been a confession text earlier that day. He was implicated in the murder because Andy's phone was on his body, Andy's blood was under his fingernails, Andy's blood was discovered in the trunk of her abandoned car, and Sal's fingerprints were around the dashboard and steering wheel with Andy's and the rest of the Bell family. The Bell case was administratively closed in the middle of June 2014, and 18 months later, Andy Bell was declared dead. Her body was never found. So my observation on this information, because I am such a great detective, is that Sal seemed to be the main suspect, especially with him no longer having an alibi. But my first thought was wondering, why did his friends flip on him so quickly? I'm not saying to get in trouble for your friends. I'm not saying that at all. It just seems suspect that they flipped on him when they did. Per them, Sal had asked them to lie for him. I've never been in a situation like that, so I can't really say what I would do. I'd probably say no, but I don't know. Probably end up dead. But anyway, now let's get back to Pip and her investigation. One of the first interviews that she did was with Stanley Forbes, a journalist from the Fairview Mail. He was convinced that Sal did it, and he covered the Andy Bell case for the local paper. He was not even close to one of my favorite characters, especially since he thought Sal did it because it's always a boyfriend. Oh, and Sal is Indian. He also mentioned that there was a death threat note in Andy's locker. He got that information from a source within the police department. I'll get back to Stanley later. I have some questions about him. Pip then interviews Ravi, Sal's brother, and he says that Sal did not exchange before leaving for Max's that night. He left home around 7, and Ravi was already in bed by the time he got home. Sal was in a really good mood the next morning, at least until he got a phone call from one of Andy's friends and found out that Andy was missing. After Sal found out, he sat by his phone and called her over and over again. I liked Ravi throughout this story. He was a big part of the investigation, wanting to prove his brother's innocence, and he nicknamed Pip Sarge. I like that nickname. So Pip decided to make a person of interest list. If Sal didn't do this, someone did. The first person on her list was Jason Bell, Andy's father. Her reasoning: Pip watched hours of YouTube footage from the early press conferences of when Andy went missing, and she thought that Jason was a bit off. His body language, with squeezing his wife's arm when she would start to cry, and how he used his shoulder to push his wife back from the microphone when she had said just about enough, how Becca shrinks from his gaze, and how he talked about Andy in the past tense. This was before Sal's alibi went away. Ravi had also mentioned how Sal thought that Andy had ran away to punish someone and that her relationship with her father was strained. The next person on Pip's list was Naomi Ward. She has spoken with her as well as Max Hastings. Naomi said that while they were at Max's that Friday night, Sal has spoken to her about Andy, how they were fighting and he wasn't going to talk to her for a bit. She said he got up around 10:30 and left. She and the others had stayed at Max's that night. She also mentioned how Sal had asked them to lie for him when they went to go see him on Saturday. Pip asked Naomi if he had told her where he was, and Naomi said she couldn't remember. And she couldn't remember if they had even asked. When Pip spoke with Max, he said that Sal didn't talk about Andy that night, and Naomi was missing for a while after Sal left. He also didn't notice Sal leave. He also said he wasn't friends with Andy and they had only spoken every once in a while. Pip asked them both if they thought that Sal had did it. Naomi said, "Not that Sal I knew." And Max said, with all the evidence, He must have. A reason that Pip added Naomi to the person of interest list was because of something Ravi has said. He said that Naomi might have been in love with Sal, and also Naomi being MIA at Max's house on that Friday. She also seemed a bit awkward during the interview. I thought her interview was awkward too. It felt like she was hiding something. The whole, I don't remember if he told me where he was and all, didn't really sit right with me. And I couldn't believe that Pip didn't ask Max if Sal told him where he was, since he apparently asked them all to lie. Again, I've never been in this situation. Maybe that's something friends don't want to know, just in case. Or maybe he just assumed that he killed her and just didn't have to say. The next interview was with Elliot Ward, Naomi and Kara's father. I'll probably refer to him as Mr. Ward from here on out. She does call him that a lot, especially with him being a teacher. He was Sal's teacher, and he also knew Sal well with his and Naomi's friendship. From this interview, we learned that Sal, he wanted to go to Yale to study history. Mr. Ward even helped him with his essay, and he ended up getting accepted. Mr. Ward called in sick on that Tuesday, so he wasn't in school. And he didn't know Andy as well, since she only had a class with him her freshman year. At this point, Pip has 4 working theories, and she shares them with Ravi. Theory 1. A third party killed Andy, but Sal was involved somehow, like an accessory, after the fact by helping bury the body. And his guilt would have led him to unalive himself. This is her theory from her thought on Naomi and how she is on the person of interest list. Theory 2. A third party killed Andy and Sal didn't have any involvement. The evidence found on Sal have an innocent explanation and are unrelated to her murder. Theory 3. A third party killed Andy and pinned it on Sal. The killer also kills Sal and makes it look like he unalived himself. And theory 4. Andy is alive since her body was never found. She faked her disappearance, and she is the one who killed Sal, pinning her murder on him as well. Next up, Sal's phone. Ravi gives it to Pip. We see that Sal has a missed call from Andy that Friday night before 9. At this point, we know from Naomi that Sal isn't speaking to Andy because they were fighting. We also see that from 10:33 a.m. on Saturday until 7:21 a.m. on Tuesday, Sal called Andy 112 times. That seems to be a lot of times to call someone pretending to be worried about them, especially if you had killed them. Ravi was told by police that Sal was making a conscious effort to look innocent. I mean, that seems to be a little far-fetched to come to that conclusion without even thinking about it, but I'm not a police officer. Sal was found with her phone, so why would he call so many times if he knew she didn't have her phone? So after Andy called Sal on Friday, Sal had sent her a text message. The text said, "I'm not talking to you until you've stopped." He also sent her other messages when she went missing. There was something with the text messages that Ravi and Pip noticed. When Sal normally sent texts, he didn't care for punctuation or capital letters. But when he sent his supposed confession text to his dad, there was punctuation and capital letters. Seems a little fishy. They also found in his notes app on his phone a license plate number 009KKJ. This was written down 2 days before Andy went missing. We'll put a pin in that. Next, we have Pip interviewing Andy's friends, Emma and Chloe. They were interviewed separately. They seem to have drifted apart after what happened with Andy. So what we learned from them about that night: Emma says she found out about Andy around 1 a.m. and she tried to contact Sal, but he didn't answer until the morning. She was questioned by police on Saturday. We learned that Sal and Andy were arguing at school that week. He seemed to be mad about something. That seems to corroborate with the text that he sent her that Friday night. Andy was supposed to stay home that Friday night. She was supposed to watch her sister Becca, who had been hospitalized for self-harming a few weeks earlier. We also learned some things about Andy here. Andy's friendship was very destructive, but it seemed that her friends were addicted to her. Being someone that she chose to spend her time with made you feel special. Andy could be very cruel to her sister Becca. Emma doesn't like the person she was when she was around Andy. Sal and Andy were not intimate. Andy had a lot of money and she didn't have a part-time job. And Andy liked her secrets. Pip ended up hitting a wall with Chloe, so she thought she would use an old pay-as-you-go SIM card to put in her phone and pretend to be Chloe to catfish Emma. SIM cards. These become a very important part of the story. I like that this was used so early to put it in the reader's thoughts. So during this catfishing moment, Pip learns that there was a secret older guy that Andy said she could ruin if she wanted to. Also, Andy's father was having an affair. So secret older guy has now been placed on the person of interest list. To break away from the investigation, Pip ends up going camping with some of her friends. And while she's camping, she ends up receiving a note in her sleeping bag. This, of course, happens when they believe that they saw someone watching them, and some of them end up chasing after that person. The note read, "Stop digging Pippa." At first, she thinks her friends are playing a joke on her, and she doesn't take it seriously. Back to the investigation, Pip has another conversation with Emma. And here we learn that Andy did not like Mr. Ward, and she was pissed at him for some reason. This was around spring break, not long before her disappearance. If you remember, Mr. Ward told us that he barely knew Andy. Why would she be so upset with him? So Mr. Ward ends up on the person of interest list, and Pip goes to Mr. Ward for some answers. So we end up learning that Andy was bullying some girl. There was an incident with a video that Andy had posted online, a video that would get Andy in trouble with school and the police, and Mr. Ward didn't want to get Andy into too much trouble, so he ended up calling her father to tell him what was going on, hoping the family would sort it out. Otherwise, he would have to tell the school and Andy would end up getting expelled. So Pip ends up taking Mr. Ward off of the person of interest list after this conversation. So right now, our person of interest list includes Jason Bell, Andy's father, Naomi Ward, Sal's best friend, and secret older guy. So Pip goes back to speak with Naomi again, and we end up learning some new things. We learned that Nat De Silva is the girl that Andy was bullying, and Naomi was friends with her. So what happened was, Andy started a rumor on Nat. She was saying that her family was incestuous and that Nat watched people undress in the changing rooms while touching herself. Andy, seriously? Okay, so the video that Andy was almost expelled over. Andy ended up getting this video by pretending to be a guy that Nat liked and asking her to send a video with her topless with her face in it. And Sal knew about all this. But he said it's Andy's drama and he didn't want to get involved. Naomi thought Sal was being too laid back, and I'm gonna have to agree here. Andy also blackmailed Nat to get her to drop out of the play, or she would end up going to the police and say that Nat's brother Daniel statutorily her. Nat ended up dropping out because she was scared of what Andy might do. This is, wow. That's a lot, Andy. That's a lot. So after learning this, Pip ends up going to talk to Nat. She was back home. She had gotten herself in trouble while she was away at school. She had been arrested and charged with assault. But Pip doesn't go alone. Ravi goes with her. One of the first things Pip notices is that Nat looks a lot like Andy. Nat ends up telling her about the bullying. She also mentions how she left a death threat note in Andy's locker that week. So the note that Stanley Forbes thinks that Sal wrote, Nat actually wrote. We also learned that Nat's older brother is also a police officer. He had just finished up his training that year. After speaking with Nat and then looking up Daniel, they learned that Daniel is the officer that told Ravi to give up when he came to the station to ask questions. And 2 more people have been added to Pip's person of interest list, Nat De Silva and her brother Daniel De Silva. Earlier, Pippa requested the transcript of Sal's conversation with the police. She received it, but there were some things redacted. And in it, Sal was rather evasive about what he and Andy had been arguing about earlier in that week. But why was he so evasive? What were they arguing about? I'm not talking to you until you've stopped, was a text he sent her that Friday night. What did that mean? Till she stopped what? Was it her seeing the older guy? Did Sal end up finding out? Was it her bullying Nat? Naomi said that Sal was too laid back about it, but maybe he was trying to get Andy to stop doing it in his own way. Those were the 2 things that crossed my mind. Her seeing an older guy might get her in trouble with her parents, and her bullying would get her in even more trouble as well. Sal seemed to want to protect her. He could could also be trying to protect himself by not saying enough. Maybe what they were arguing about might give Sal a real motive to have killed her. That's what Pip wondered. Also a possibility, but we gotta keep going to find out. The next person Pip spoke to is a big one. Becca, Andy's little sister. The last person that we know to see Andy alive. And we learned something that put a certain character at the top of my person of interest list. So Becca's interning at Fairview Mail, the same place that Stanley Forbes works. And guess what? She is dating him, or kind of seeing him as she says it. So many alarms went off in my head at this point. Stanley has to be a secret older guy. He killed Andy. And now he's dating her younger sister because gross. Pip also noticed how much Becca now looked like Andy, and she ended up getting a lot of single white female vibes. And that is a movie that I honestly have not seen in forever. Anyway, I had talked myself down a bit about Becca. She was Andy's sister after all. They were going to look alike, but I had not talked myself down about Stanley. And I didn't understand why he had yet to be on the person of interest list. But the next person Pip placed on the person of interest list was Max Hastings, Sal's friend. So Pip ends up speaking with Jess Walker, Becca's friend, who was a friend of Becca's while they were in school. Jess spoke about how Jason, Andy and Becca's father, was emotionally abusive to his family. Like how they looked was the most important thing in the world. I remember when I was over for dinner one time, Andy was upset that she didn't get into any of the colleges she'd applied to, only her backup, that crappy local one. And Jason said, "Oh, it doesn't matter. You're only going to college to find a rich husband anyway." And Jason would also put one of his daughters down when the other one did something good. Jess also mentioned that Becca looked up to Andy and she started to dress like her. And she also planned to ask for the same car when she got her driver's license. Becca also started to want to go out like Andy to the calamity parties. After one of the parties, Becca asked Jess to go with her to get the morning after pill. Jess did ask, but Becca did not tell her who she slept with. We also learned that the night Andy disappeared, the alarm had gone off at Jason Bell's business offices, and that was during the dinner party. He had been nervous to talk to the police about it because he had driven there to check on it, and he was drinking that night. Pip also learned that Jess thought that Andy was dating someone who wasn't Sal because of how close she was to someone else at a calamity party. And we find out that guy turns out to be Max Hastings. And they look pretty friendly together. So earlier, Max had said that he barely knew Andy. But why were they so friendly together at a party? So Pip started to wonder if he could be the secret older guy because he had been held back a year. I personally was thinking it could be Stanley, but I'll let Pip have her own mind here. So Pip learns that Max has a secret Facebook profile, one that he could post anything he wanted. So I just want to take a moment to say that Pip is pretty bold. She ends up going to question Max on her own. She does things on her own quite a bit throughout this story. So in Max's bedroom, Pip finds a photo of Andy where she is wearing nothing but black underwear. Max claims he found it in school. Pip doesn't believe him, but can you blame her? That seems very far-fetched. Then we learn that Andy Bell was dealing drugs. She was working with a drug dealer in town and gave him a market that he didn't have before. That could explain all the money Andy had that her friends mentioned since she didn't have a job. Max ends up claiming that he doesn't know who the drug dealer is, and he pretty much kicks Pip out of his house. Next, Pip gets her friend to go to one of the calamity parties, and she cozies up to a guy to figure out who the drug dealer could be. They end up learning it is Howie Bowers, and then he ends up on the person of interest list. So that list now includes Jason Bell, Andy's dad, Naomi Ward, Sal's best friend, secret older guy, Nat De Silva, girl bullied by Andy, Daniel De Silva, brother of girl bullied by Andy, and also a police officer, Max Hastings, Sal's friend and also potential secret older guy, and Howie Bowers, a local drug dealer. Next, Pip does something else that could be ridiculous and stupid. She goes to the train station. Now, going to the train station doesn't seem like it's something stupid, but she goes alone, down at the end with no cameras. Again, like I said, Pip is alone. And I'm just sitting here wondering why. Why did you go by yourself? What are you thinking? What is going on? But she hides in her car because I guess she has nowhere else to hide. So when a supposed Howie shows up, she ends up calling the number that she got from the guy at the party, and the supposed Howie at the train station picks it up. Of course, after she hangs up, he calls the number right back. Luckily, she thought to put her phone on silent. I'm curious about what her voicemail says. Oh, guess who shows up? Stanley Forbes. It seems he is being blackmailed by Howie for killing Andy Bell, perhaps? Okay, that's just me putting my 2 cents in, but I finished the book and I know how it ends. But he is still suspect. I just suspect him about everything. After Howie leaves, Pip ends up leaving her car and follows him home. Bold Pip. My goodness. Seriously. This is a lot. And she's by herself. I don't think she has a weapon. It's not like she has a dog with her. She's just out by herself, just doing things that don't seem like she should be doing. So she finds out that the street that Howie lives on is the same street that they found Andy's abandoned car. She also notices the license plates at the house that Howie went into. It is the license number that Sal wrote down, 009 KKJ. She ends up calling Ravi to meet her, and then they end up going to Howie's house. At least she's not alone this time. So they end up going into Howie's house, and they end up getting him to talk. Because Pip is now blackmailing him. She had taken pictures of what she saw at the train station that night. Him dealing to a few kids and all. Also, she would go to the cops about how Andy used to work for him. So he starts to talk. They learned that Andy was the one who came to Howie to deal, and she got a second phone from Howie to use for her said dealings. Andy kept that phone in a loose floorboard in her wardrobe. They also got out of Howie the type of drugs Andy sold. One of them was Rohypnol. Andy was selling roofies. Oh, Andy. I wasn't put on this earth to judge people, but you are a fictional character, so you're awful. I just want to say that. Andy is rather awful. But let's continue. One of the people that Howie described that would buy the roofies was someone that looked a lot like Max Hastings. Howie also denied being with Andy in a romantic fashion, and he didn't have an alibi the night that Andy went missing. He was home alone. So before Pip leaves, Howie had her delete the photos that she took at the train station, but she does end up recovering them after they left, just in case. So Pip starts to receive some text messages. Someone is telling her to leave the case alone while she still can. So now she's getting threats. She's getting text messages, as well as that note that she got left to her while she went camping with her friends. These messages seem to be from someone that would know where she is, as well as her phone number. She is starting to not think that it is her friends playing a joke on her. So what does she do next? She decides it is time to break into the Bells' home. She said, I don't care what you think you're going to do to me. I am the main character in this story. I'm going to find out what's going on, whether you like it or not. Ravi does decide to go in with her. They want to get to the burner phone. They think that it could lead them to the secret older guy. The burner phone ends up not being in a loose board in the wardrobe. And of course, they almost get caught as well. Becca is supposed to be at her internship, and the mother is supposed to be at work. Becca ends up coming home because she forgot something, and she does leave without thinking that anyone was there. That was way too close of a call, Pip, but you are the main character. And while they're in there, they see that Andy's room was just how she left it, and they find her old agenda. Pip decides to take pictures of some of the pages. So later on, Pip starts to look at some of the photos that she took. And Andy wrote some things in code. TS stood for train station. She most likely wrote down when she went to meet with Howie. The letters IV was written down. Pip wanted to figure out what that meant. HH was another code where she thought it meant Howie's house. A phone number was scratched out in it. And Pip tried to figure out whose phone number it was, but she couldn't. So Ravi thought that IV could mean a couple things. The name of a nightclub or the name of an inn. When Pip did an online search, she noticed something about an inn. The background of the bathroom looked like the background of the photo that Max had of Andy. So Pip and Ravi end up traveling to the inn. The woman that owned the place said that after seeing a picture of Andy that Pip showed her, that she was just here and she saw her just a few weeks ago. My thoughts went to that Andy is either still alive and she still goes there, or Becca goes there with Stanley. Pip learns that the woman has Alzheimer's and she may confuse a few weeks ago with a few years ago. I don't buy it though. It was either Andy or Becca. So when they returned to town at the train station, they saw Howie speaking to someone who turned out to be Max. It seems Max just had more lies. He moved up to become number 1 on Pip's person of interest list. So Pip starts to wonder about the Rohypnol and the calamity parties that Max throws. She did some investigation and she learns that a few girls felt like their drinks might have been spiked. Also, Nat Da Silva was one of those girls. Then there was a girl who was not named that was roofied. This was a few months before Andy went missing. The girl didn't remember being at the party and she went to the police station to report the incident, but nothing ever came of it. So with Max being suspect number 1 now, Pip enlists Kara to get Naomi's password to her Facebook. And they learn that Naomi is in fact friends with Max's secret Facebook profile. When Pip goes on there, she starts to see a bunch of pictures from the night that Andy disappeared. And there was one picture that was taken that had Naomi, Jake, Max, and Millie in it. Naomi was looking away from the camera. She was looking down at her phone, and you could see the time on her phone's lock screen. It said 12:09. There were only supposed to be 4 people in Max's basement at 12:09 a.m. So, who was the one taking the picture? That person was none other than Sal. His friends had taken away his alibi. And then we get a classic I know what you did last summer moment. Naomi and Max come clean to Pip. Sal's friends had gone out to a party and Max was driving. He claimed to not be drunk and was okay to drive them home. On their way, he ended up hitting a man and they left him there. And the guy is now in a wheelchair. So someone found out and ended up blackmailing Sal's friends. They were told that if they didn't do what they were asked to do, they would have to deal with the police on what they have done. So they took Sal's alibi away to cover their tracks. So now we know that Sal didn't lie to the police and he didn't ask his friends to lie for him. So Pip and Ravi try to time themselves on whether or not Sal still had time to kill Andy between leaving Max's that night and returning home. And it didn't seem plausible. Sal seemed to be innocent. They could go to the police with this information and clear Sal's name, but that would mean that Naomi would get in trouble. Then Kara would lose her sister, and she already had to deal with losing her mother who died years earlier. Kara begged Pip not to go to the police. Naomi is her sister after all, and Ravi, Sal's brother, of course wanted to go to the police. They ended up coming to an agreement. If they didn't find a killer in 3 weeks, they would take the photo to the police. Then Pip gets a new note. Oh, these notes. Love notes, I guess I'll call them. And this note was on her Word document on her computer. It said, "You need to stop this, Pippa." It was typed enough times to fill 4 full pages. Now Pip is freaking out. Someone had been in her home. I suspected one of her parents for a hot second, a brief hot second, probably a hot second each. I suspected Kara too, thinking that she did that because of Naomi. And Pip also receives another warning at school. After running into Nat Da Silva in the hallway, she was at the school trying to get a janitor job to no avail. Pip found in her locker a folded piece of paper telling her that this was her final warning and she needed to walk away. Does that stop Pip though? No, of course it doesn't. I'm not sure if that would have stopped me either. But the next thing we know, Pip goes to talk to Becca. She decides to go to the Fairview Mail. She runs into Stanley Fords, but he doesn't know who she is. I believe when they talked earlier, it was just over the phone. Becca does end up speaking to Pip after she sees her. Becca's working on a story about this old farmhouse that has been vacant, and neighbors are wanting to turn it into a cafe/bar combo. But Becca doesn't think it's a great idea. She wants it to go to a family. Her dad almost ended up buying it before Andy disappeared. So Pip tells Becca that Andy had been dealing drugs. Becca doesn't believe her. She asks Becca if she knew Max Hastings. Becca says only as Sal's friend. Pip then also asks questions about Max and as well as Daniel Da Silva. And then Pip finds out that Daniel was close to Jason Bell. And Daniel was one of the first responding officers when Jason reported Andy missing. Pip also tells Becca that she is close to proving that Sal didn't kill Andy. I think you're telling people awfully too quick, Pip. Just hold down, get your evidence, and then you can tell everybody. Like, slow your roll. Slow down. Pip then goes to a local meeting where she can speak to local officers. She talks to Daniel a bit, and she learns that he is the police officer that went to the Hastings house when Max crashed his car into a tree in front of his house. This was a cover-up to him hitting the guy on the way back from the party. Then Daniel's wife comes up and she has an attitude about Daniel speaking with Pip, saying that she wasn't his usual type. Later, Pip sees Daniel speaking with Stanley Forbes. Something is going on with Stanley, I just know it. Then something happens. Something I'm still pissed about. Pip's dog Barney gets kidnapped. She is told to destroy her laptop and any USB or hard drives her project was on. My first thought was this was set in 2019, right? Because it's 5 years after the events that happened to Andy Bell, which was in 2014, right? Dropbox existed. OneDrive, Google Drive, iCloud. Did she not keep stuff there? So she ends up doing as she is asked. And yet, her dog still dies. I was pissed. I was pissed. I've never had a dog outside of playing The Sims, but don't be out here killing her dog. What is up with horror and mystery thrillers killing dogs? Like, what is up with that? So I was ready for Pip to say, F this. I did what you asked, and you still kill my dog anyway? I'm gonna come find you. But she didn't. She's a senior and scared that something might happen to her family, or even Ravi. She tells Ravi that she's done. She tells him that she isn't working on the project anymore, and she threw it all away. She didn't have the photo anymore either, the one that Sal took of his friends that could help clear his name. And of course, Ravi is pissed and he storms away. I understand both. Pip is scared about putting everyone in their life in danger, and Ravi just wants justice for his brother. But the next day, Ravi ends up coming back. He couldn't understand why all of a sudden, for him, Pip would just change her mind. He realized that someone had threatened her, and then they took her dog and killed the dog. Again, so pissed. Come on. That is why she said all that. And she also didn't get rid of the photo, as well as the project. She emails everything to herself. Every time she writes something new in the capstone project, just in case. Okay, we're getting close to the end now. Remember earlier when I mentioned how I liked how the author had added in the SIM card information? How Pip used an old SIM card to catfish one of Andy's friends? Well, Naomi had broken her phone. She was waiting for it to be fixed and she was using an old phone of hers. She wasn't using her own SIM card though because it didn't fit. She did find a pay-as-you-go one in the house and that one fit, so she's using what is left of that. Naomi called Pip one day and she knew someone that had studied at Columbia. She thought that they could help Pip with the interview stuff. I knew this call was important. Naomi wasn't just going to call her out of the blue. This was a mystery novel and all. Everything that happens for a reason. So Pip noticed that the number that Naomi called from looked a lot like the number that Andy scribbled out in her planner. She speaks with Kara and she finds out that the pay-as-you-go SIM card that Naomi was using belonged to her dad, Mr. Ward, the man who said he didn't know Andy that well. The man who said Andy was just upset because he had called her father about her bullying. The man who would have known that Pip was camping with his daughter and their friends. He had a connection to the school where he worked and could have left a note in Pip's locker. He didn't have an alibi the night Andy went missing, with Naomi staying over at Max's and Kara staying with Pip. He also called in sick the day Sal was found in the woods. One thing Pip did earlier when she was at the Ward's residence was turn on settings in the printer to know what has been printed. She did this because she was suspicious of Naomi. So Pip is over to Mr. Ward's office to see what has been printed. She reprinted one that had been done the same day that she got that note in her locker, and it said the exact same thing. So Pip and Ravi needed a plan. Mr. Ward was said to be tutoring 3 nights a week, but what if he wasn't really tutoring? They turned on Find My Friends on Pip's phone, and on a ride home from Mr. Ward and Kara, Pip slipped her phone under his back seat. And then Pip and Ravi tracked Pip's phone. It stopped at a house in a different town on a street where the Wards used to live, a house that he was supposed to have sold years ago. And bold Pip is back. She decides to go to the house and confront Mr. Ward herself. This isn't the same night she and Ravi had tracked him. She wanted to go that night, but Ravi didn't think it was a good idea. And I agree with Ravi here. Smart Ravi. This was a different night. But before she went into a house with a person that she thought had killed 2 people and her dog, she does at least dial 911. The operator tells her to stay in her car. Pip, of course, doesn't listen. Mr. Ward is confused as to how she knew he'd be there. Then she told him that she knew what he did, and he seemed to be relieved that it was finally out. So he confesses to being the secret older guy. Mr. Ward is the secret older guy. He had gone to the end with Andy. He was lonely after his wife died, and Andy started to pay attention to him. It only happened a few times, he said. Then he broke it off over spring break through some text messages. She threatened to tell when they all got back to school. That is when he found out about her bullying. So it was true when he said that he called her dad. She could tell and have him arrested, but he would also get her expelled. On that Friday before she disappeared, Andy showed up at Mr. Ward's home at around 10. She smashed up some paintings that his wife had made him, and he pushed her. Andy seemed to have hit her head on the desk. She seemed a bit confused, but she was conscious. She probably had a concussion. He rushed out to get the first aid kit, but by the time he got back, she was gone. The only thing left was her phone. And he found out that Andy had gone missing the next day, and he started panicking. He needed to give the police a strong suspect. That is when he decided to blackmail his daughter and her friends. He had been reading his daughter Naomi's diary, and that's how he learned about the hit and run. Then on Tuesday, when he was supposed to be at home sick, he went with Sal into the woods and killed him. He used the blood that he missed from cleaning in his office and used a tweezer to put it under Sal's fingernails. Wow. But now that we know what happened to Sal, what happened to Andy? According to Mr. Ward, he was driving one day in July, and he said he saw her. She was walking from a different town and heading to Fairview. That is when Mr. Ward picked her up and brought her back to that house they were in, and she's been there ever since. Mr. Ward wasn't tutoring, he was looking after Andy. He didn't want her to go back home so everyone would find out that she was still alive. That would mean that they would probably investigate what really happened with Sal. So the police get there and Mr. Ward is arrested. And Pip runs up to the attic. She has to see Andy. She has to see that this is true. But it turns out it's not true. There is a girl there, but she's not Andy. Mr. Ward had kidnapped the wrong girl. And while they were talking, Mr. Ward told Pip that he did not kill her dog. Now, on the way home from that house, Pip does end up seeing the Bell family. They were in the car, and the parents seemed to be crying and upset. And then in the back seat was Becca, who seemed to be in a daze. So Pip did what she set out to do. She proved Sal's innocence. Sal didn't kill Andy. But where was she? This seemed to bother Pip, and she went through all the information over and over that she had, and it all pointed to one person. She called Max Hastings needing to verify something. Becca Bell had been roofied at one of the Calamity parties, and Max had her. That is why she couldn't tell Jess who she had slept with. She didn't know. So Pip, again, decides to go to someone she thinks might be a killer alone. She shows up to the Bell's house and she talks to Becca. Becca offers her tea, and for some reason Pip drinks it. You think this person is a killer? And they offer you a drink and you drink it? So Becca ends up confessing to what happened that night. She was upset after realizing what had happened at the Calamity party. When Andy had returned home, Becca didn't know that she had a head injury. She told Andy what had happened to her, and Andy looked at her and told her she didn't care. Andy also told her not to tell anyone because it would get her in trouble, probably thinking about how she's the one dealing drugs. So that made Becca angry. They started shoving each other, and then Andy fell back onto the floor. She was coughing and choking, and Becca just stood there and watched. After seeing the blood in Andy's hair, she thought that she had done that to her. She ended up putting her body in the trunk of the car and drove her out to the farm, the one that she was writing about in her article. That's why she didn't want it to turn into a bar/cafe. So Becca is the one that is seen driving from the bank security camera at 10:40 p.m. And she didn't want the farm to change, like I said, because she didn't want anyone to find Andy. Becca was also the one texting Pip. Mr. Ward was sending her the notes and Becca was texting. She was the one that kidnapped her dog Barney. She claimed that she didn't mean to kill him, but guess what? The dog still died. While listening to Becca, Pip realized something was wrong. Something was off. Becca had roofied her. Seriously, if you ever go to someone's house alone where you think that they have done something bad, do not accept a drink from them. Just don't accept a drink from them. So Pip runs out and she tries to get away from her in the woods, but Becca catches up to her. Luckily, Pip still having Find My Friends turn on worked out in her favor here. Her father and Ravi found them before Becca could have strangled Pip to death. And that is what happened to Andy Bell. So Mr. Ward had pled guilty to first-degree murder of Sal Singh and also kidnapping Lisa Jordan in the first degree. She's the girl that he thought was Andy. Becca Bell would be tried for criminally negligent homicide, illegal disposal of a dead body, and tampering with evidence. Max Hastings was charged with 4 counts of sexual assault and 2 counts of and Howie Bowers had pleaded guilty to the charge of possession with the intent to sell. But I still have some questions. What was Howie Bowers blackmailing Stanley Forbes over? What were Stanley and Daniel De Silva talking about during the town meeting? And why did Jason Bell's office alarm go off? I feel like I might have more questions than that, but those are the ones that come to mind right now. I will say while reading, I tried not to spend a lot of time trying to figure out who did it. I'm pretty sure I suspected everyone at some point, but I really just wanted to go with the story and try to pretty much find out what happened along with the characters. My suspicions of Stanley Forbes, though, those are still there. I do not like him or trust him. And this book is the first in a trilogy, so at some point, I am going to have to read them. I do own them, so that's good. I could probably start them soon. Also with this book, I noticed while reading that it was set in Connecticut, but the author is from London. In doing some research, I found that the US version is set in Fairview, Connecticut, and the UK global version is set in Little Kilton, Buckinghamshire. I'm curious though if there were any other changes besides the location between the different versions. This book kind of brought me back to when I used to listen to the first season of the Serial podcast. I remember being obsessed with that podcast when it came out, but not as obsessed as apparently a few people were on Reddit, but I was obsessed enough to make sure that I listened to it each week. I also ended up getting one of my friends to listen to it as well. I'm also a huge fan of Veronica Mars, and reading this brought me back to the first season where Veronica was trying to find out who killed her best friend Lily. Highly recommend that show if you haven't watched it. But that is all for today, and if you've read this book, I would love to know your thoughts on it. And thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. For more videos like this one, you can check out my most recent recap of The Summer I Turned Pretty. But I will see you all in a new video soon.